Where we get into trouble is when the naming and the labeling is connected to psychological significance. That where we label ourselves or someone from a psychological perspective. Again, the labeling or the naming can be helpful. That we can identify someone who is overwhelmed in some state of disturbance, or someone who's very available to closeness, for example. But it very easily moves us into justifying judgments of ourselves and others. And I just want to briefly look at narcissism from that perspective, because I think that it's helpful to look at narcissism not from a psychological perspective, but from the perspective of the Prabhu method, from a somatic perspective. And there are people that we encounter who would be labeled as extreme narcissists, aggressive, narcissistic people, people who are locked in narcissistic behavior, which is making every relationship and every situation all about them. And we can encounter these people, and for whatever reason, there's something that I would say is broken inside, where they are locked in this spasm in their body, and there's not a very high likelihood that they're ever going to be able to be free of this narcissistic behavior. And then there is the spectrum of those people whom we know, and maybe ourselves, who at times we are very narcissistic in our behavior, or we're with others who are very narcissistic, but then we open up and do become aware and interactive with the other, and actually engaged in serving the other. So it pulses, and sometimes the pulse breaks down and we're caught in narcissistic behavior, and other times we're not possessed by that narcissistic behavior. So when we look at this somatically, we're looking at an activity of the reactive system. We're looking at what has been labeled as the false ego, something that I would call the reactive ego, and distinguish it from the responsive ego. In reaction, it is about survival. It's about survival of the self. And it's in response to a hallucinated threat. But when we go into reaction, isn't it all about us? We're not really able to relate to anybody else because we are caught up in fight and flight and freeze behavior in relationship to a hallucination. So we're not only not connected to others who are around us, we're not connected to reality. And from that perspective, don't we all engage in narcissistic behavior? Can't we all be described as narcissistic? Not continuously, but episodically. That whenever we go into reaction, we are by definition narcissistic. So when we look at this somatically, we're looking at the wounded experience. And in the wounded experience of fight or flight or freeze, we move into aggressive separation or isolation. Narcissists can also be, rather than making it all about themselves, you see narcissists who always are making it about somebody else. But it's still a narcissistic behavior. It's all in reference to them. And it's a survival behavior. I think that to recognize that reaction is not an action of the ego. The ego is reacting to reaction. So for us to judge someone, for example, who is an extreme narcissist, is lacking humanity. That we're using that judgment to isolate this person, to separate from them, and to not address the need to deal with our own humanity. And by humanity, I don't mean that we just are sentimentally allowing of the person's behavior. When I say we need to address our humanity, we need to recognize that when we are with someone, for example, who is so wounded that they are locked into a narcissistic personality, that there is a demand from us to hold an appropriate boundary in the relationship, not an aggressive, attacking, or fleeing boundary. That we hold a boundary in which we don't lose our humanity, we don't lose the connection to our warmth, but we recognize that for the other person and for ourselves, we need to hold a boundary that doesn't give them access to us, but doesn't abandon them. There's a possibility when we do that they might wake up and start to struggle, to become more aware. But even if that's not true, there is no demand for us, because we are not really threatened. There's no demand for us to be aggressive against somebody who is lost to their wound. And I'm speaking about this with narcissism, but for me, that goes with any psychological label that is put on other human beings. It's a fault of the psychological system, that it labels and it names and it categorizes, and it uses this as a way of describing human interaction from a perspective of illness or pathology. The fact is that if you are encountering an extreme narcissist, they give you an opportunity to grow. You can struggle to stay present to them, present to your experience of their pain, and that struggle deepens your ability to be present. It deepens your own vitality. So from that perspective, there is no human being that we meet who doesn't offer us a gift, except in very rare cases where you meet somebody who's holding a gun to your head and about to pull the trigger. Those are exceptional cases, but that's rare. Maybe 1% of our experiences in life justify a reaction. But that, again, is not to judge the reaction. When we fail, when we react, use it as an opportunity, because that's what it actually is. It wakes us up to something about ourselves we don't like. And it gives us a chance to learn how to love even those aspects of ourselves that are not that pretty.